This is the worst thing that has ever happened from a president in the last 60 or 70 years. Nothing. This is as bad as Vietnam. At least we had good intentions in Vietnam. Joe Biden deliberately destroyed the border. He emasculated the Border Patrol. He let in 12 million illegal aliens.
Hello, and welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. This is our Saturday edition where we look at something different in the middle segment, and Victor is looking at World War II for the next few weeks, and this week we're looking at 1940. And then we'll do some news stories, and on deck we have the Venezuelan government and Venezuelan gangs in the United States, and then Kristi Noem has been talking to a congressional investigation committee or inquiry, and we'll hear about Kristi Noem's testimony in the first segment. So stay with us, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor is the Martin and Neely Anderson Senior Fellow in Military History and Classics at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. You can find him at his website, victorhanson.com. So come join us there, and you can also join us for this podcast on YouTube and on Rumble. So we'd love to have everybody join us in either of those places. So Victor, we have lots going on. There are two things about Venezuelan gangs in the United States, and one is Miranda Devine, as is wont with her, is that she always has great articles, and this one is not just that there were Venezuelan gangs in the United States, but that the Venezuelan government had facilitated their illegal immigration into the United States. And then the second story about Venezuelan gangs is the attack on cops in New York City that recently happened. 11 members of Tren de Aragua that were from Venezuela, they think, most of them were, and then against two cops. So I was wondering your perspective on those gang-related things.
That's exactly what Trump said. He said that 9 years ago when he came down the escalator. He said that they are sending, in this case he was referencing Mexico, but it applies to all these countries. He said they were not sending their best. And as a general rule, our enemies are people who don't like us. It's a money-saving deal. Anybody who's a criminal or a gang member, they encourage to go to the United States because the American left either is so naive and doesn't understand what's going on or actually welcomes that as a chaos factor. I can't tell. But the Maduro government hates us. And so the only way that we're going to stop that is not just deport them. We're going to have to sanction those countries, and we're going to have to sanction Venezuelan oil. We should just say to Maduro, you take them all back, you do it again. Anybody who buys oil from you, we're going to sanction. And that's the only way to stop it. They are at war with us, as in a way Mexico is too. I mean, Trump says he loves Sheinbaum and everything, but the cartels are killing 75,000 a year, and they're running up $171 billion deficit, and they get $63 billion in remittances. So the whole, as I was on Fox last night, and I was asked about the open border, and as I said, I think on one of our podcasts, we still don't know why anyone would commit such a disastrous act against their own country. This is the worst thing that has ever happened from a president in the last 60 or 70 years. Nothing. This is as bad as Vietnam. At least we had good intentions in Vietnam. Joe Biden deliberately destroyed the border. He emasculated the Border Patrol. He let in 12 million illegal aliens. He didn't ask for a vaccine while he was kicking out 8,500 military officers for not being vaccinated. I was in Arizona, I think it was Arizona, and there was a sign that said people undocumented got to go on planes without any ID. We were requiring this next week, real IDs for U.S. citizens. But illegal aliens? I don't think so. I have a feeling that if I go to the Fresno airport and you're an illegal alien, they'll just wave you in. It's the weirdest thing we've ever seen. And this came on top of 20 million illegal aliens that were already here. And I've talked about going into the Fresno airport on a delayed flight in the middle of the night or early morning, and just it was the most crowded time during the day. No explication. You'd think the Fresno Bee would think this was a breakthrough story. My gosh. Sleepy Fresno Airport from 12 to 5, busiest time of the year. Let's find out why. It was the strangest thing, and no one ever says why. Why did he do it? Did he want a new constituency? Did he want early voters, mail-in ballot voters? Was he just angry at half the country, the garbage he called them? Did he hate borders? We don't know. It's so surreal. And so they're everywhere. It's going to take 2 generations of Americans and hundreds, if not thousands of dead, find every one of these people who are criminal. 500,000, it's thought. How are you going to find 500,000 criminals? You're not going to find them until they commit an act. And then these judges let them go. They just said, you're in a sanctuary city. So Judge Brosberg, he can pontificate every way he wants, but all of his decisions in the real world are predicated on the reality that no illegal alien who is violent is going to show up at his child's private school or at his home. And he doesn't care about the reverse, that they're going to do that to thousands of Americans. They've already done it. It's the worst thing that I can think of, that a president would destroy their own sovereign borders and invite in 12,000 people, emasculate the Border Patrol, and then basically say, if you get a deportation order, you don't have to do anything. We'll give you an app to fly right in from southern Mexico to the United States without a passport. It's just incredible. And he did that. He will go down as the worst president of the last 50 years, Joe Biden, just for that. Forget Afghanistan, forget the 2 theater wars abroad, forget the hyperinflation, forget printing $7 trillion. That alone should brand him as the most failed president in my lifetime. Easy. He makes Jimmy Carter look like, I don't know, Pericles.
Yeah, that's probably true. So, Victor, along that line and immigration, Kristi Noem has been in Congress testifying to the Congress in their inquiry and what's going on with deportations. And I was wondering your reflections on how she's handling that.
Well, she's very well prepared, but all she has to do is just scan 5 newspapers and then see what the liberal talking points are for the day. And that's what she did, because the Congressional Democratic Caucus is joined at the hip with the media. They have no original thoughts. They have no original strategies. They have no alternate agendas. All they do is get their media, the DNC operatives, send them talking points from the media. So this week it was woman deported to Mexico with her children. Another story. House raided and family terrorized by ICE.
Can I just say that their biggest claim in these tests, the congressmen were saying, was that those children were U.S. citizens.
That's
so
what
they
I'm getting at. I'm getting at. So all Noem had to do was just look at their talking points. You didn't have to look at them. You know what they were going to say. And then she had to endure the little pontification and, I'm sorry, this you're right, what they usually do. Just self-referential narcissism. So she just said, this person's illegal, and she had children. So she had a choice. The children were born in the United States. You can stay here. We'll get a cousin, an aunt, or I can take you back to Mexico. And she wanted to take her own children. Does the Congresswoman think that she should go in to a family matter and say, your children can't go back with you to Mexico even though you're the mother? So it was a clear-cut thing. The mother wanted to be with her children. That's where they were for most of their lives, were in Mexico. So why not go back? What's so bad about Mexico? Everybody thinks it's really weird about this left wing. They think Mexico is hellhole. Maybe it is. I've been there, but they think it is. And they're not supposed to think that because they're liberal and third worlders. Just like they go down to El Salvador and tell a sovereign nation what they can and can't do with Mr. Garcia. Your citizen is really our citizen, even though he's not our citizen. But we're telling you, Mr. Tin Horn Dictator, that's what they sound like. The other case is they knew a house was used for trafficking. So they went in there to stop it. And there were people there. And they said, well, they were just innocent. Well, they were in a house where they were trafficking. It's the same thing that people don't. This is a losing issue for them, A to Z. When the American people look at, and it's very hard to look at it because you've got to go to a normal media outlet because they don't want to talk about it. But what's the key issue that gets people so incensed is the asymmetrical treatment between citizens and illegal aliens. So anybody out here listening, you get in your, I don't know, get in your SUV. You get 8 people with you that have no IDs, that don't speak English, and you're driving cross country, and you're speeding, and you have no valid ID, and you get pulled over for speeding with no valid ID, with 8 people with no ID who don't speak. You're going to be arrested, and they're going to bring the car in, and you're going to go to jail. That's just a fact. They didn't do anything to him. They called the FBI, and the FBI was under Biden orders to let every illegal alien go. I think a lot of that nihilistic, destructive policy was hatred of Trump. I think just Biden said, I hate that guy, and I hate everything he stands for, and I hate the garbage MAGA, the ultra MAGA, the semi-fascist MAGA, and I'm just going to do crap that makes it horrible for those people. I'm going to drive them crazy. Every principle that these judges are talking about to stop Trump, and some of my former friends that are writing very eloquent, Andy McCarthy, what they don't understand is they're writing very eloquent about all these rights and everything, but they don't ever say that these people are breaking the law right now and they're subject to immediate deportation because they're guests. And they don't. I don't know what it is. They don't get it. I guess they want 12 million deportation hearings.
It seems to me that they are just throwing things against the wall and they don't really have a full-on plan, partly because they just have this ambition to destroy the civilization that they might rebuild. And then what would they rebuild? We don't know. But nonetheless, I think that's why all this stuff just happened in the last 5 years when COVID
I don't think
came
they
on.
even. They're parasitical people. They destroy the civilization in their day job, and then they go at night and they enjoy the benefits. That Met Vogue ball, that was the most Petronian, disgusting thing I've ever seen. The pictures of them. I think Kamala Harris, did she have a $75,000 designer dress on? I think she did. So this is a woman of the people. $75,000 is more than most people make in a year. So when she prances around, I think the theme was a black thing or something. So you have all these people who supposedly are on the left, as the arts community is, and they are trying to show the world that they're the most self-indulgent, narcissistic, egocentric, materialistic, grasping people in the world. And they just go out to see each other, and then they go back to their day job and trash the country. But what the left doesn't understand is they keep doing all of this, the Tesla charger fires, the protecting and shielding these criminals. And then there's this 51% of the American people just watch it every day. And they say, we don't like these people. We don't like anything to do with them. These people are crazy. And they don't get that. They think they're so intelligent and so moral that everybody's impressed with them. You know, Schumer. They think, wow, he starts yelling about, look at the Newark problems with air traffic. This is Trump. This has been going on for 5 years. It's a complete mess. Everybody said the last 4 years that the entire air traffic control computer system is like an analog. It's just Neanderthal-like. Biden didn't do a thing. And then when they were bragging, not Trump, not me, not our viewers or listeners, they were bragging that said they were going to have half of all United pilots were going to be DI. And they said if you were an air traffic controller and you had military experience and you were a white male, don't apply. So it was all DEI and it was all antiquated, anachronistic equipment. And now, for the first 100 days, Newark is a dysfunctional place. And all of a sudden, Chuck Schumer saying, you did it. He is really something else. I've never seen a politician melt down and descend into the utter depths of irrelevancy and anger. I mean, if you look at his record, he's telling people to go into Republican districts at town halls and disrupt them. He was the one that shouted at Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and threatened them by name. He should have been censored by the Senate for that. And now he's paranoid about this AOC candidacy. He used to be 30 years ago semi-normal. He's completely crazy. They've all become crazy. They don't understand that Donald Trump had this unique ability to peel off their veneer, their exoskeleton, and show who they are, because that's who they really are. And then they went crazy over Trump. I think sometimes when they make fun of his orange skin and his hair, that he does more of that. You know what I mean?
He dresses up his orangeness.
And he does his Queen's accent and his comb over, and he has Carney right there, the Canadian Prime Minister, and he talks about 51, the taboo subject, just to make their heads explode. And they do. They do all the time.
Yeah, he's got them, that's for sure. Well, since you mentioned the Newark airport, I just wanted to add to that because at the Newark airport, what happened was 90 seconds, the control tower lost the airplane and lost contact with the
A
airplane.
lot of airplane had no contact with anyone, I think.
And to the question of their antiquated systems, they apparently still use floppy disks, which is a word all the way from the 80s when I first started using computers. And GPS was created in about 1988, 89, and they're what our phones function on when we look at maps. And they're not even up to speed with the GPS systems, which is absolutely crazy as far as anything goes.
It's very funny. I flew all during the 80s and 90s. And I guess the technology hasn't changed, but I never was worried. Everything was smooth. And in those days, the avionics on the planes were very primitive. So today, the plane, not the air traffic control, the plane's radars are very sophisticated. Private enterprise. Government, no. But when I go to an airport today, it's just chaos. If they say you're going to board at a certain time, you don't. If they say group one, group two, people just barge in. You see people in wheelchairs that are walking around fine, and then they jump in their wheelchair to get overhead compartment space. And you think, maybe it's because I see it a lot at the Fresno airport, but you see one person trying to load the whole plane, like 200 people. And then the next moment you see her, she's after she's doing it, she's doing other things like down by the baggage. She's like everything. Or you land and you're really tired, and then you see somebody with the sky bridge that just keeps bumping the plane and can't do it. And then you look at the passengers, and when I was really young, I had a really old torn up car, and it couldn't even make half the time the trip home from Santa Cruz to campus to my farm, and would break down. And it was had 200,000 miles on a 544 Ladybug Volvo. So I take the Greyhound bus from Santa Cruz to San Jose, and then it took 9 hours to go 180 miles. But the people on it, you know what I mean? It was like, and that's what the people are on the plane. The planes have turned into bus stations, and there's not enough, they're overcrowded. That's one of the reasons I'm quitting flying on June 1st. I've got all these trips to do. It's not just I had this sinus infection, the pressure. I don't want to do it anymore. If somebody called me up and said, we're going to give you $100,000, and I've got some good offers, not that high, but it's really good, I can't do it because I did it for 50 years. And it's just today there's I think a New York Post story. The woman just took all of her clothes off and walked down the aisle. And I've seen that one time where a woman behind me kicked me really hard and said, look at this. I turned around and she was topless. And the guy next to her, I said, you better put a blanket. And the guy next to her said, no, I'm enjoying this. Shut up. And then she started walking. I mean, there's psycho people, and then they bring Frito boats and eat right in front of you. And I really feel for the attendants. They're trying to be so professional, what they have to put up with, and the pilots. But the whole society is coarsening. And I don't know.
And it's funny that there's such great technology now. You just brought up a memory of mine when you said about your old car. We used to have this VW Bug. It must have been a 1960s one. And it couldn't even have gone to San Francisco, but we drove it around town, and we had to start it by pushing it pushing it as fast as we could get it to
Pop
go
the
and
clutch.
popping the clutch.
I did that a lot.
And I know that these days they always say, well, there are people that can't even drive a clutch car, and so I always thought that was
That's always
the
funny.
technology is so much better now, though. And
I was in the parking lot not too long ago in Fresno. At an acupuncture place, and a guy pulled in, and I could hear him shift. And I got out, and I said, "You actually?" And he explained to me it was a Dodge, I think, that is the only model that has a clutch. I said, "Why did you buy it?" He said, "Nobody can. I don't have to worry about it being stolen." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "None of these people know how to drive a clutch. They're idiots. If they tried to steal my car, they couldn't drive 5 feet." So I hadn't thought of that. It's pretty smart.
yeah, it's amazing though that the technology is so much better, but the people are not as clever.
That's what's the sign of a medieval Mycenaean society. When you get a little tiny elite at top that knows how to, in the case of the Mycenaeans, they had linear B and they had organized everything. And then you had the people on the bottom. And when you decapitate that top, nobody knows what is inside this phone. Nobody knows how it works. But they do love to go dee, 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 dee. And the same thing with the planes. There's a few really brilliant people who are running this society, and then there is hoi polloi. And they didn't used to be that way. When I was driving in this little old Volvo when it started, that had SU twin carburetor, I knew how to take them apart and clean them. And I knew how to adjust the clutch when it was going out to get some more mileage out of it. They don't know. I don't know how to do it. Nobody knows anything about this technology, and they're so vulnerable. At least when I was growing up, I could see my grandfather. He had mules and donkeys, and he'd hitch them up. And if we had an apocalypse, I could do that today and farm. It would not be easy. I know how to hitch them up. Nobody knows anything like it. They don't have any surviving skills whatsoever. And yet we're closer to the apocalypse because we're so vulnerable. And because everybody is dependent on this technocratic elite that runs everything, like Elon Musk. The more they hate Elon Musk, I'm thinking, Jasmine Crockett, you should get down your knees and beg for his long life and health, because he gave you everything in your world. You use Starlink whether you know it or not. You are a member of the U.S. government. He is saving NASA. You get on X, I know you do, and it is being run at 1/10 the cost than it did before. And you may not like Tesla, but a lot of your people do like Tesla. Here in California, if these refineries are actually driven out by more regulation, California legislature is just a bunch of really lunatics that escaped an asylum. I mean that. They just get together and think, well, I'm pretty well off. How can we make heaven on earth today? Let's just shut down all the oil refineries. Well, I'd rather blow up some more dams. Well, I'd like to get more trans people as mandatory workers on high-speed rail. Well, what do we do first? Well, let's bring back, I don't know, racial prejudice in hiring. Oh, but we already have the $950 you can loot and steal. Well, another person will say, well, let's raise the income tax to 16%. Well, didn't we just do it to 13.3%? That's how they think. They're shutting down oil refineries. And there was an article today that suggested gas, if they were to do that, and they think would easily get to $8 a gallon. And they hate Elon Musk. If it gets to $8 a gallon, people will be swarming into Tesla. And if it does, I know the mindset of the California legislature. If that happens, the first thing they do will be jacking up PG&E prices so they can gouge them as they charge their car. Because these people in the legislature have never had a job outside of government. Most of them have been successful by one thing: pleading victimhood and grievance and saying they're going to level the playing field against the rich, the aristocrat. That's what they do. Kind of like Bernie Sanders. And the whole state is, Sheriff Villanueva was on, the LA sheriff who's now Flip. He was quoting Reagan that the party left him. He used to be a really crazy Democrat, and now he's a Republican, but he was really funny about Gavin Newsom. He just said, everything they touch is destroyed. And he was absolutely right. Now they want to fire the LA director of water and power. You're laughing because I thought, wow, they hired her from PG&E. They paid her $700,000. She had a very spotty record at PG&E. And then she put out of commission a life-saving reservoir on the top of, because the cover was torn, and therefore the drinking water. Well, I drive by Crystal Springs on 280 all the time. It's a huge reservoir for drinking water and water use. There's no cover on it. Maybe you can treat the water. Isn't it treating the water better than having no water? Then they had an alternate backup reservoir from 2013 in case that one, it hasn't been repaired. It's not. And then the hydrants were not. She should have been fired on day one. She was a DEI hire. She really was. I really like that term now, DEI hire, because they put DEI in your face for the last 10 years. DEI, DEI, DEI. We're going to do the DEI. And then they hired all these people that were incompetent. And so that people can just say that's a DEI hire. And they say it's racist. No, it's not. I would like to know in that pool that hired her, all the candidates and all their backgrounds and all their resume and the decision process by which they picked her. And I think
she probably had to answer the DEI question 4 times.
That's what it is. It's self-evident.
Yeah. All right, Victor. So we're going to go to our return to the past. I wish we had some music like do 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 do.
Good World War II.
Yeah, and get back to World War II. But first, let's listen to these messages, and we'll be right back.
Time is our most precious commodity, and we've heard from so many listeners who've asked for advice about how they can spend it wisely to improve themselves and the people around them. Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, more than 40 free online courses. Learn about the works of C.S. Lewis, the stories in the book of Genesis, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution and the rise and the fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church. With Hillsdale College's free online courses, you can even take Victor Davis Hanson's class, The Second World Wars. This free 7-lecture course will help you to understand this massive and complex conflict in a new way. It will give you a clear picture of why the war was fought and how the Allied powers ultimately triumphed in order to save the West from a new form of tyranny. This class is taught by Victor Davis Hanson and Hillsdale's president, Larry P. Arnn. The course is self-paced so that you can start whenever and wherever. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/VDH to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/VDH to enroll for free. hillsdale.edu/VDH.
Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. You can find Victor on social media. His X account is @VD Hanson, and on Facebook, he is on Hanson's Morning Cup. So please come join us there. All right, Victor, we're on to 1940, World War II. I'm excited to hear this is the beginning of the war. The Nazis are still doing well.
Well, it's the second year, so they invaded Poland. And the Russians joined them under the tenets of the Ribbentrop-Molotov non-aggression pact of August 23rd of 1939. So they've now absorbed Poland. And it's into October, November. And Hitler has said that he wants to invade Britain, but he takes a strategic pause. And this is what Daryl Cooper and other so-called World War II students have criticized Churchill. Churchill, remember, is not prime minister. That fact is lost. So Hitler now looks at the map, and he's got all of Eastern Europe allied with him. He has all of Russia sending him massive amounts of food and oil and strategic materials. He looks at Scandinavia, and he sees that Sweden is a neutral, sending him with free transportation, the best iron ore in the world. He looks at the map of Europe, and he sees Italy and Germany and Austria, which is now part of Germany, with a straight rail line right to the Mediterranean. And then he looks at Western Europe, and he sees Portugal and Spain, pro-fascist. He looks at North Africa, and he sees Italy is in Somalia, and it's going into Egypt, and he thinks we're in a good position. But we have two problems: France and the great French army that has not ever folded, and we have Britain that's an island. Okay, so then he puts out little peace feelers, and he says, I'm willing to let the British have their empire. And the Chamberlain government is completely humiliated because he went into Poland. He said that after the Saarland election and after the militarization of the Rhineland and after the Anschluss with Austria and after the Sudetenland annexation and the destruction of Czechoslovakia, on each of those occasions he said that was it. So he lied repeatedly. So Chamberlain said, "You're lying." And Chamberlain was the one that declared war on the Chamberlain government. Okay, Poland lasted a month because it was squeezed, as we said. So what's he going to do in 1940? He wants a little breathing room. He's actually lost about 25,000 men and a lot of equipment, and they're not fully mobilized yet. So then he has a plan, a two-step plan, to invade France and go around the Maginot Line. Remember, everybody, the Maginot Line starts at the French border, but it goes all the way and stops at Belgium. And people say it did not continue for two reasons. To the northeast is the Ardennes forest. And in the age of mechanical vehicles, they thought they couldn't go through there. And then as you head westward to the Atlantic, there's the Belgian border. And the Belgians said, "Please don't wall us out." So they stopped. So the Germans had this plan, and Van Manstein, who was actually an evil but an authentic genius, he was just a corps commander. But then they brought him back, and he had what he called the sickle cut. They were going to, in a lightning-fast invasion, go through the Ardennes and then go straight into the Netherlands. And they were going to go into Belgium and cut that off and then circle and cut off the British army from the French as they went through the unprotected border of France and Belgium. And that's what they did on May 10th, 1940. That very day, the Chamberlain government fell. Winston Churchill had been First Lord of the Admiralty, and they brought him in back as Prime Minister. He made a war cabinet. He brought people from the Labour Party, Liberal Party, etc. And he brought in Chamberlain, who was dying, I think, of intestinal cancer. So then the next thing is, what happened? Well, everybody thought the French army was 3 million strong. They had better tanks. And again, read Marc Bloch, Strange Defeat. It collapsed from May 10th. Essentially, it collapsed in 25 days. By the middle of June and by June 26th, it was over with. They circled around, they cut the British off, 300,000 were trapped at Dunkirk. And at that point, Hitler made his first strategic error. He said to his armored troops, Guderian, Rommel, the corps commanders and division commanders, von Rundstedt, finish them off. And they said, "Just give us a couple of days because we're exhausted." They'd been fighting for a month. And Goering came and said, "I'll just bomb them. We have the Bf 109. We're just going to Stuka. We're going to bomb them, and they'll never get out back to Britain." At that point, Britain made Churchill took half of British fighter strength, half of his Hurricanes and Spitfires, and he allowed them to go across the Channel and fight to obtain air parity. And then he called on all Britons, anybody with a boat, to get over there, and they evacuated 300,000. They tried some of them were trapped lower to the south ports at St. Nazarene and all the way down at Brest. And I think... I'll remember the name, but it was the worst maritime. They brought a ocean liner to pick them up, and they picked them up, and it was bombed and torpedoed, and they lost 7,000 people, died. The worst single loss of a British ship in history, much bigger than the Hood to come. So it was a disaster. And at that point, it was kind of like a Mexican standoff. Hitler said, "Look at the map, Britain. There's nothing left for you." It's 1940, nothing. And every single capital was in British hands. And what do I mean by that? In April, before he went into France and...
I'm sorry, did you mean in Germany's hands?
Germany's hands,
yeah.
Excuse me. But in April, he invaded Denmark. 6 hours they lasted. Then he went in, the British tried to stop him from going into Norway. and they fought really well, but they lost the glorious aircraft carrier was lost. I don't know how you do that when it had a range of its bombers of 180, 200 radius, but it was blown up by a battleship. So Norway was taken over in April. The Norwegians still fought. April, May, there were French and British troops there, but they had to bring them back to France when they invaded on May 10th. So my point is that after June 28th, in the April-May invasions, they had taken Norway and they had taken Denmark. Sweden was neutral but pro-German. So all of Scandinavia was in their hands. So they had both sides of the Baltic Sea. It would be very hard for the British to blockade Bremen and the German ports because they had all of Scandinavia, and they had about 100,000 troops in Norway, and they can theoretically bomb England from Norway. It's a long way, but they did. At that point, they went in and attacked France. France fell. The British were evacuated. So when we look at the map of Europe, let's just say July, for Hitler visits Paris. He's very happy. That's the only time he ever visited Paris, talking, it's a beautiful city. They bring out Mr. Marshal Pétain, the 85-year-old hero of World War I, the collaborationist Vichy government. He says he will keep a lid on things from Vichy, and then the Germans love that. They only have to put 100,000 troops there because the French are self-policing themselves. Every single capital, Madrid, Lisbon, Rome, Berlin, Copenhagen, Stockholm, Oslo, Amsterdam, Brussels, all of the Eastern, Athens soon. They're all in, the war's over. And then they offer a deal to Churchill again. They take another breath and they say, now you don't have any hope. And would you cut a peace? And that's what is in a lot of these alternate narratives, that Lord Halifax wanted his job, but he had turned it. King wanted Halifax. Nobody wanted Churchill. He's too unpredictable, they thought. Halifax didn't want to do it, but he wanted to be an inside player. And he said, I'm going to go talk to Mussolini. They all thought Mussolini would be, because Italy was on their side in World War I. And they had been friendly with Mussolini in the 1920s. And they thought he was going to cut a deal. Not only was he not going to cut a deal, he would wait till France was just about destroyed. Then he invaded to carve off some on the border. So that didn't work. And so by August, all of what is now the European Union, all of it was under German control, one way or the other, either through pro-Axis neutrals or occupied lands or Axis power. At that point, it was just Britain. The United States quickly then started to inaugurate a draft. They started to do something cash and carry. But the problem they had was the evolution of war was transgressing at such an astronomical pace that their P-40 fighters, for example, they were already outdated. In other words, the Supermarine Spitfire was already being updated, and the Bf-109 were both better than any fighter we had. So we really couldn't. We didn't have very good tanks. The Lee tank was not very good, the Stuart tank. So we really couldn't help them. And we weren't even, our army was the size of about the Portuguese army, 17th so we were desperately at this time trying to build a fleet. We got smart in 1940. So the only effort, so when Hitler looked at that map, he said, I've won the war. I'm willing to have a peace on my terms where I control everything. Churchill said, nobody has ever invaded Britain. We have 10 times the cruisers, 10 times the battleships, and we have 8 carriers, and you have none. And we can be supplied by Canada and the British Empire. We control Gibraltar in the Mediterranean. We control Suez. And we will fight you. The Italians have to take Malta. They can't do it. Britain still had the biggest fleet in the world, and it was being supplied. So then Hitler did 2 things. He unleashed the U-boats, and that was the Battle of Atlantic, started in 1940. And by 1941, he was stopping about 35% of everything from Canada coming in and coming in from Suez, and Britain was hard-pressed. And the big thing was the United States then was neutral. And then they started to discuss what would become Lend-Lease. That did not happen really until he invaded Russia in 1941. So if you imagine what the Depression, when you had the Soviet Union, the biggest country in the world except for China, and it had all of this natural wealth, and it's on and the biggest army in Europe, and it's on the side of Germany. And then something happened that nobody invaded. Hitler, this is very interesting because Hitler was a rogue, a liar, and a scoundrel, but so was Stalin. So when they had this non-aggression, when Hitler was going to the West, Stalin said, oh, by the way, all of your Eastern European fascist allies, Hungary, but especially Romania, we have border disputes with them. So we're just going to take Bessarabia and carve it off. And oh, by the way, you took all of Scandinavia, so it's our turn. We're going to take Finland. But the Finnish government was neutral and even pro-German, if it's a question of being pro-German or pro-Russian. So they invaded in November, and they had the fight of their life, the Winter War. It's kind of like the Ukraine War, but by March, Stalin was clearly is going to destroy Finland, and they made a deal, and Stalin got 10% of the country, and everybody was furious. At that point, in early 1940, Hitler said, he was too late in 39 to invade. It was too late in 1940, while all this invasion was going on, to invade Britain. He went to Dönitz and Raeder, his Navy commanders. Do we have naval superiority to get across the channel? No. He went to Goering. Do we have air superiority? No. So in August of 1940, he started the Blitz to bomb. He was winning. And then the British came up with a brilliant strategy to send bombers and hit Berlin. And they did. Didn't do much damage. And that enraged the Luftwaffe and Hitler. So they did something that was really stupid. They diverted their attacks on radar stations and fighter bases and went toward incendiary bombing of London, Manchester, just as a terror weapon. In other words, they had concentrated on all the British airfields, and they had halved British fighter strength by half, and they were destroying the radar stations. British had the best radar in the world. So now their attitude was, if we keep on another month, they'll never know when we're coming, and we will come in without any worry about their aircraft, because they had fighters based in France, so it wasn't that hard for German fighters to escort over. And
can I ask a question before you go on right at that point? Wasn't the kill ratio between the British and the Germans in that battle for Britain 3 Germans for every 2 British?
Something like that, but that was essentially the Bf 109 was considered the best fighter in the world in 1940, but they had never really encountered the Supermarine Spitfire that had a Merlin, the first model, Merlin-ish, and it was comparable, and it was easier to fly. But the main advantage was that about half of all planes that were shot down over Britain, the pilot was not killed, so he could parachute. There were cases where they would go up in a Supermarine Spitfire, fight, get shot down, parachute, and get back in another plane the same day. It wasn't true. If you were a German pilot, you were if you survived the crash or you bailed out, you were going to be a POW. And so they really, and you have to remember another thing, we don't really appreciate this. After the Polish campaign of 1939, after the invasion of France in 1940, and the Scandinavian campaigns, by the time of the Blitz, August, September, October, November of 1940, the German Luftwaffe was really hard-pressed. It had lost a lot of planes and its best pilots. And so they did not stop. They could not stop the fighter opposition. And by November, December 1940, as we end this year, Hitler came to the conclusion that Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Great Britain, would not happen. He had neither air nor naval superiority. So he came up, there were 2 things that were very critical in World War II. Molotov came to visit him, and he was being bombed by the British. And Hitler said, we have all of Europe, and we're pressing Britain. And Molotov said, if you have all of Europe, why were we in a bunker in Berlin? And then Molotov began to lecture Hitler about they were going to take Finland, they were going to carve pieces off of Germany's allies in Eastern Europe, and he wanted this and this and this in exchange for the wheat and oil. And then Hitler came to two conclusions. I cannot take Britain. Britain is the only power left. There's nobody else. The United States is not going to get in the war. However, I don't trust Molotov and Stalin. They are pressing us. They're breaking their word. They're horrible. They're communists. Just like I said in Mein Kampf, I want to revert back now to the agenda that I outlined in Mein Kampf. And if I do, if I knock out Russia, I will be unstoppable. Think of the strategy of Hitler. I can't take Britain of 40 million people, so I'm going to attack a country of 240 million that's 30 times the territory, maybe 50 times the territory, in order to isolate Britain even further. It didn't. So that was the decision to be made. The end of 1940, he originally planned to go into Russia around May 1st of 41. That would be delayed. And the idea was to completely isolate Britain and to get so many natural resources and oil that Germany would now be, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, it would be the largest empire in the world. That was his idea. He came very close. The other thing, very quickly in 1940, Japan is mostly in China, and it now has half of China, and it has the main cities of Beijing and Shanghai. It has all of Korea. And with the fall of France, then suddenly you have these lucrative French colonies in Vietnam, Cambodia, and the Mekong Delta, which is the richest food-producing area. And Japan then quickly, at the end of the year, says it's going to protect Asia from European white people. And they make a puppet government under the Wang toady. He's kind of like Quisling. To run this whole thing, they're not stupid. They want to use their military to take Russia, and the Japanese they don't want to be an occupying power and waste all their resources. So they get people like Quisling in Norway to keep a lid on things. They get Wang in China to keep a lid on things, a puppet government. And they get Pétain in France. And they've got it controlled pretty well. And then the Japanese government sees an opening because they think the European colonial powers are all gone. So they take all of French territory, their colonies in Southeast Asia, and they get the resources. And then they look at the Dutch East Indies. And after May 20th, there is no Dutch government. It's in exile, and there is no Holland. So there's nobody in charge of Indonesia. So they go in there. They try to blow up the oil fields. That's Shell Oil Company, a Dutch company. But they take over the oil fields. So then they've got food, they've got oil, and they've got this huge army engaged. It's bogged down in China. And then they have to make a strategic choice. And they don't know quite what to do because the United States is watching all this. So then the United States, at the end of 1940, tells the Japanese government, you've got to get out of China and you've got to relinquish your stolen European colonies. And we're going to cut off all steel, scrap ore, raw materials, oil to you. And Japan looks at this and says, we won't have any oil, we won't be able to run this war machine. And by the way, the United States, if you look at their fleet in the Pacific, at the beginning of 1941, it was still in San Diego, the 7th Fleet. But they look at these old battleships, and they look at 2 or 3 carriers in the Pacific, and they have 8, 9, and they have a much better, newer fleet. And the Mitsubishi Zero is much better than any American fighter, the Wildcat or P-40. So they're not afraid, and they see opportunity further because they see Britain is now all alone, and they think Burma, India, Singapore, Malaysia, they're all British colonies, and they're all going to fall because Britain's under the Blitz and can't aid them. So our strategy will be, when we go to war, we will add to our colonies in the Dutch East Indies and Southeast Asia. We'll take Malaysia, we'll get all the rubber of Malaysia, and we'll get the great port at Singapore. And then we have one last, what should we do next? There's the Philippines, and there's Hawaii, and Wake Island, Midway Island, and the Marianas. And they're all under American control. And this is the big question as they go into 41. Shall we attack the British and the American? The British, yes, because they are weaker and they're surrounded. But the Americans are still unarmed. If we're going to do it, we better do it sometime in 41, because the Carl Vinson Acts are now law, 1940, the final one, the 38, and those acts call for the building of 25 carriers, all better. The Japanese have good intelligence, and new classes of heavy cruisers, submarines. And if this was to be enacted by 1943 or 1944, they would have a bigger Navy than all the Navies. So we've got to act in 41 if we're going to do it. And if we're going to do it, then we destroy the entire fleet that was stupidly moved from San Diego out all the way to Hawaii, where it couldn't be defended. We grab Midway, we grab Wake Island, which they did, and then we'll grab all of Mariana, which they did, and we'll grab Hawaii, which they didn't, and we'll grab Singapore and Malaysia, which they did. And then we will tell the United States, the war's over, we want peace. And that's where they left it in 1940. The Italians, unfortunately, think that because they're on the German side and they've taken Somaliland, they're going to invade Egypt from, remember, they have colonies now in the East Africa, and they have colonies in Libya. And they think they're going to go in and squeeze the British in Egypt and take Suez, and then say to Hitler, look what we did. The Italian fleet is now the biggest fleet in the Mediterranean because the French fleet was destroyed. Churchill makes a very controversial decision. He sends the British fleet to North African ports and blows up the French and kills about 1,200 Frenchmen. Vichy French. And the French get very angry, good propaganda on the part of the Germans. Now Mussolini said, this is so great. We're here, and the British fleet has to protect convoys to North America, and it's got to be worried about the Bismarck, all these, and this is great. We're the only fleet in the Mediterranean, so we're going to give Hitler a present. We're going to invade Egypt and take it, and then we're going to take Malta. And unfortunately, you know how that ended. 30,000 British troops beat 250,000 Italian.
Wow. Well, Victor, that will end it there, but you left some great questions for the future. How was the Luftwaffe Air Force, how was the Luftwaffe rebuilt after its battle for Britain? Did a lot of damage. And then
they lost a lot in 41. In Greece, and the battle for Crete, that was right on the verge of the Russian invasion. They lost 1,000 planes in the Balkans and a lot of transport, especially transport planes.
They must have been building like mad, but we can save that for the future. And also the Italians, when the British had to fight, or the Americans, and the British.
Italians were really kind of weird, because if you look at their actual planes, they were the most finely crafted, and they were as good as any planes, but they made like 10% of what the British. They didn't have an idea of mass production. They didn't have the wherewithal to do it. But they had brilliant, it's kind of like Ferrari and Maserati. They're brilliant engineers, but they don't understand mass production and cheap cost. And same with Germany. All during the Blitz, people don't realize that they were producing more Spitfires per month while they were being bombed than Germany did. They were still producing nylon stockings for German women and chocolates. They were not fully mobilized. In fact, he thought that he was an illegitimate leader, and he knew that. And he didn't want to have domestic tension, so he was demobilizing after the victory of France. He thought he'd won.
Well, nothing like Italian engineering. Ask any woman that wants anything in clothes or in apparel. So
they made very good planes, but they didn't make enough of them.
All right, Victor, let's go ahead and take a break. Thank you so much for that. It was fascinating. Anybody who wants more on World War II and Victor's take on it, The Second World Wars is the book to buy by Victor Davis Hanson. So stick with us, and we'll be right back after this break for some more current events. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plum hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen. Made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. Found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut, type 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything. Coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And you can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. Visit getnativepath.com/Victor and start your transformation today. That is getnativepath.com/VICTOR. I personally love the PM Collagen formula with melatonin. It's given me many nights of great sleep, and the electrolyte drink mix for my water at workouts. They are my friends, and I'm sure they will be yours. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor, so there has been quite a few things. The University of Washington, Antifa just took over a building, and they did, according to the University of Washington, $1 million in damage as the police had trouble getting them out. So I was wondering your thoughts on the new
Wow. I
Antifa.
mean, Harvard is trying to galvanize all the universities on the premise that A, we're not anti-Semitic, B, we can control on our own violent protest, C, we have disciplinary policies in action that will stop campus unrest. And you have this thing at the University of Washington. It's really weird. Almost every single day, something happens on a campus that proves what this Department of Education is saying. They find a huge new grant from Qatar or China that was not reported. Or they uncover somebody who was charging 50% for an HHS grant. Or there's another demonstration at Columbia or Harvard where it's anti-Semitic. Or you've got people like Antifa violent and they won't do anything to them. If you were the president of Washington, you'd think we have facial recognition. I promise you that anybody who did this $1 million, we're going to seek felony charges. But they're scared to. And so it's not fair to the students at the University of Washington about all of these administrators. They will not guarantee a student just basic rights. If you come to our university, here's your Bill of Rights. You will be protected to say what you want as long as it's not, hate speech or you're going to incite a riot. Even that's questionable. Number 2, you will not be discriminated because of your color of your skin. You will not, or your gender. Number 3, you will be able to go to class and people will not physically disrupt you. Number 4, they will not assault you. We will not let outside people come in and damage the college. Number 6, your tuition will not go up over the rate of inflation. Number 7, we will be very transparent and tell you exactly how much money comes in from foreign governments. Right? Number 8, your faculty that are teaching you are not going to gouge. We will guarantee you they will not gouge the federal government. They will take only 15%. Number 9, we will guarantee your loans. You are going to our university. You need money. You don't need the federal government. We have an endowment, and we will counsel and guide you which majors are going to end up on what type of salary, and we will ensure that you get, if you want, and you will graduate in 4 years, and we will tell you, just like if we're selling you a car, what your interest rates will be, how much your monthly payment will do. But we will guarantee it. They can't do that. They won't do it. They can't even tell them, if you're in a class and you want to ask the professor, if you're in modern social problems of the United States, and you say, how many people are aborted every year? Or do we discriminate against white males in admissions in the United States? Or isn't natural gas pretty clean burning? You can't answer those questions, and that's the problem. Is DEI really fair? Isn't it contrary to the civil rights legislation? They won't answer. They won't answer that.
Well, since we're on the crazies from the left, just to talk about how deep it goes into the fabric of our society, a New York Times editor, Ellen Pollock, was trying to decide whether to admit an article on Harvard's conflict with the administration, and she threatened the reporter Rob Copeland to kill him, to kill another one that was on the story, and to kill herself as well. Allegedly, at least that's what they reported in a meeting that went on for hours on this one particular article. So the New York Times editors, we all know, are left, but it's interesting to see just how crazy left they are.
The problem, we saw that with the old Twitter, if your worldview is left, which is communist, neo-socialist, share the wealth, no hierarchies, a binary that you either have to be a victim or a victim, and you implant that ideology onto a business, businesses don't run that way. Militaries don't run that way. They need strong, then you get insane people. And we had that John Hopkins graduate student who posted, and he said that it was inevitable that you can't deal with the Trump people, you just have to kill them. And we get these threats all the time, or people threatening Elon Musk. And the strange thing about it, they are the people who always say the right are dangerous, and yet they're the ones that are always making the publicized threat to kill people and to be existential. You know, they tried to destroy Sarah Palin's public life because when that congresswoman was shot, Gabby Giffords, and by that deranged, I don't know who he was. I mean, I remember him, but he wasn't some right-wing nut. He was just a nut. Well, she had said that for the election, we needed to target districts and flip them during the Tea Party era. And on her little map, she had bullseyes. And they said, this is what led to Gabby being shot, your bullseye. But nobody believed that. But Joe Biden had a call, I think it was 1 week before Donald Trump's first assassination attempt on him. And he told the donors that they had to put bullseyes on Trump and his supporters. So my point is, they use all this inflammatory language all the time. And then they always project it on right-wing. January, there was nobody in the Capitol with a gun. There might have been a guy that they said had a gun in his car, but it wasn't an armed insurrection. If you looked at the Antifa people, you would probably find a lot of armed people. So my point is, it's all one way. It's all death, kill, assassination attempt, Steve Scalise, now we have a name. The FBI knew about all these people, all of his previous threats, and then they always say that we've got to eliminate guns. If you want to eliminate guns, New York Times editor, and you believe in gun control, then don't talk about killing people, okay? Just start there. And Jasmine Crockett, you want to take people's guns away, just don't say you're going to take down Elon Musk. And Chuck Schumer, don't say to 2 Supreme Court judges they don't know what's going to hit them. And Merrick Garland arrests people who show up at Supreme Court justices' homes, including an assassin. And Secret Service people, do your job and make sure that somebody doesn't have a clear shot at the President of the United States. That's all we ask.
Well, Victor, we are on a hard deadline here, a hard end here. So I'm going to go to our comments from our viewers. And I've been skimming the YouTube and the Rumble comments this week. And this is from Hatchet Ma 77, and it addresses the assault on civilization by the left and the decivilizing of things and self-reliance. And here she goes. I think it's a she if Ma means mother. Victor, we have been off the grid since 2016 when we fled California. Power is stored on our LifePo batteries, have not paid an electrical bill, sewer bill, or water bill since. Know how much that this tells us how much dollars I have saved. At least $15K in 7 years for electrical services from SMUD. That must be their electrical supplier only. We are on a well powered by 4 solar panels, garage powered by 8 panels, house powered by 30 panels, travel trailer powered by 8 panels, all-terrain warrior. So love your prolific pic and videos. Those are powered by 4 panels. Self-reliance! Exclamation point.
I agree. I think that's great. I have a daughter, and as I'm speaking right now, I'm helping her put 36 panels and a battery on her 5-acre little place. And I have a son, and I'm putting 34 panels and a battery. I have 44 under the original system where they get you. It's pretty good, but I don't have a battery. Thing about it is, in California, each new iteration of solar panels, they're more efficient and they produce more, but at the same time, the state of California gives you less and less for generation and charges you more and more for what you use. So what people are doing in reaction, they've got away from the paradigm that they're generating electricity, it goes into the grid, and then what they use, it's aggregated and they come out on top. You can't do that with the new stuff because it's going up. So what they're doing now is getting batteries. And at first it doesn't work out because the batteries are expensive, but they know that PG&E is going to keep doubling. And so it does work out. And I think we're going to get to a position in California where you're going to get a lot of people off the grid. They're going to have batteries and they're going to be generating their own power.
Well, thank you for everything today. The discussion of World War II was especially wonderful. So we'd like to thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for listening, everybody, and watching.
Yeah, and thanks to our audience. And this is
I'm on my way to a final statement. I'm on my way to give the graduation speech at Hillsdale College. I have my Afrin for my pressure changes. And also, I make a final thing. I had mentioned that there was a brilliant college president at USC, and he was from Cyprus, Max Nikias. Remember that? Well, the State Department official that is now being transferred from her ambassadorship to be special envoy Ukraine, she's a very gifted person, apparently, and that will help Stephen Witkoff, whose portfolio was kind of crammed with the Iran deal, Hamas deal, hostage deal, and Ukraine, as well as all that other stuff. So if the administration wanted, and I think I heard a rumor, somebody sent me a rumor that they offered this to a politician, and he thought that he didn't want to be the ambassador of a small Mediterranean country. If that's correct, I can't, that was the allegation. I won't mention the person who turned it down, but it's not a small, unimportant Mediterranean country. It's historically, from antiquity through the Ottoman Empire to the modern age, one of the most key pieces of real estate in the Mediterranean. It's very important in our tensions with Russia. They use it as a place to launder money. It's a volatile place between Turkey and Greece. It's very strategically located. There's a lot of natural gas there. I think there's still a British base there. It was under a British protectorate. And it's very pro-American, as is Greece now. Greece always was, but during the dictatorship, there were tensions. So what am I getting at? I think the administration, I know nobody in the administration listens to this, but they could do a wonderful thing and appoint as ambassador to Cyprus Max Nikias, the ex-USC president, who is an engineer, fluent in his native language, Greek, fluent in English, of course, a fantastic fundraiser, and it would really reflect well on them. And they would have a dependable, loyal supporter who would be invaluable in discussions. And that area is heating up in the Eastern Mediterranean because of the Assad dynasty, the territorial ambitions of Turkey, the Middle East wars that are going on, and the volatile nature of Egypt, the reenactment maybe of the East Med pipeline with Cyprus, Greece, and Israel to bring needed natural gas to Trieste, I think it is. So it's a really critical point. It's a very prestigious. I just don't. If that's true that somebody turned that down, I can't believe it. But I know somebody who wouldn't,
Yes, Max Nikias.
and he
And
would be the best qualified of anybody.
6 degrees of separation, Victor. So maybe somebody's listening to this. Who
I hope
knows?
so. Stephen Miller.
Yeah.
I hope Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller is.
Or maybe somebody's listening to this who knows Stephen Miller who could talk
Stephen
to
Miller's
TJ.
really. I mean, he's a remarkable person. He's really transmogrified from an expert on the border, remember, to an expert on everything. He's the most articulate spokesman. And another person who's really is Marco Rubio. But those two are really there's Trump's strongest assets, at least publicly explicate and fearless about dealing with the media.
Yeah, I think Marco Rubio outdoes Vance and even Ron DeSantis. Both
I
of
went to
those
the
guys are
acupuncture
as well.
yesterday, and I got a bunch of needles in my nose. But anyway, the person who was doing it stopped, and she'd watched a video of one, and she asked me what I thought of Carolyn Levitt, and that was her hero. She said, I really admire her.
I do too.
She's so
awesome.
attractive. She's so well-spoken. She's so confident. She's so unshakable. She is.
Yeah, she definitely talks in that fashion, which is
She's
wonderful.
doing a good. I think Kaylee McEnany kind of set the standard. She used those books, remember? But she was defiant. And maybe Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Kaylee. They kind of set a standard of conservative women who were fearless, well-spoken, better prepared than the press, kind of treated the press like children in a nice way, which they are.
And Carolyn, who is 27, is one step up. My binder is in here. I love that.
Yeah. So anyway.
All right, Victor. So we'd like to thank our audience and thank you. And this is Sami Winc and Victor Davis Hanson.
Elevate water.
Yeah. Put it up so they can see.
Everybody, I love
right
this
there.
water. This is a gift from our dear friends, Adrian and Michael Weiner from Los Angeles area. And they've been giving it to us as a gift. And I really appreciate it. It's got hydrogen in it. Gives you a little boost, a little edge for your immune system and energy.
This is Sami Winc and Victor Davis Hanson, and we're signing off.
Thank you, everybody.